The title of this podcast is The Limited Leader. This particular episode is inspired by a book that I recently read that's called Exhale by David Weil. He is a doctor who was a transplant doctor, and I guess still is, for over 25 years. Has done some great work at different parts of the country, really contributing to the field. He worked in Louisiana. He's a physician in Texas and Dallas, as well as Northern California. It's some great work. And when he describes his leadership style and the way he showed up, he was an incredible advocate for patients. He cared immensely for the successful transplants and the long lives that people live post-transplantation. He was grateful for, but he also suffered quite a bit when patients didn't make it, when there were some complications and patients died. The leadership part of it, that part of his patient care and his commitment and alignment with his purpose is admirable. It's inspiring. The part that he acknowledges could have been different was the way he went about it in working with his colleagues. He acknowledges that he was not one who allowed people to take a more measured approach, in which, in addition to advocating for patients, you also are kind in the service of that. You treat your colleagues with respect instead of demanding uh, from them, in a way that does not support their well-being, does not make them feel valued or as an equal partner. So he acknowledges that. And that got me to thinking about the way that I led ToBeRe for a number of years, especially before the practice. The way I went about it, I think, produced some results, but I certainly didn't treat people the way that Keith 2.0 treats people now. And the things that I would allow to bother me because they didn't meet my expectations caused them and me a lot of suffering. So there are a couple examples, and some, when I look back on, are pretty trivial. An example would be someone is late and me not being able to get over that. And, we had a commitment that everyone shows up on time. And so perhaps we do an extra exercise as a result of that. But it's the way that I went about it, that the way that I think I made people feel, as if they had, let everybody down, and I blew it way out of proportion. And not only did I do that, additionally, I wouldn't drop it. I would keep it going. And maybe that's something that you're doing in your life or with the people that you work with right now. You can't drop an issue. Michael Singer says, once it's happened, past tense, let it go. There's nothing you can do about it. It has happened. You can change your behavior moving forward with how you will interact with certain situations or deal with certain situations and people. But that thing that's already happened is done. But I didn't do that. I didn't let it go. I continued to rehash it over and over during a session and sometime thereafter. Additionally, another some things that would happen would be we would work out at the track on a Saturday morning. It'd be 40 or 50 people that would show up. Every once in a while, I would entrust somebody to bring certain gear or to set up the workout a certain way with equipment, or I would entrust them with a bathroom key so that we can use the facilities at a high school track. And if they forgot the key, misplaced the key, didn't set the equipment up to my exacting specifications, you would think that, the greatest crime in the history of humankind had been committed the way that I would carry on. I wasn't a great leader in that respect. I designed some great workouts that were effective, for physical goals and that really tested, your mental capacity to handle stress. I did that piece of it, but the other part, I fell short. I fell really, really short. And I give you several more examples, but what's clear to me was I was a limited leader. When things didn't meet my expectation, I made it about the other people not being able to handle my expectations. But really what was going on is I couldn't handle my expectations not being met. First of all, to have expectations is okay, but don't be attached to them because life has a way of changing things, of throwing in reality. And you want to be the kind of leader that can handle that. I work with some amazing people at Mayo Clinic, and the leaders that are the most inspiring to me are the ones that can handle, things that show up that were not anticipated. And you can plan all you want for, things that may or may not happen, may or may go wrong, but you can't plan for everything. And so it becomes a test, a litmus test on what kind of leader you are. Are you a limited leader? Let's say you're working with a new crew in the OR, or that you are not a physician, that you are a staff member and there's change, can you handle that? An inspiring leader is one that will still make everyone feel valued, even if it's not the A crew that they're working with. Maybe it's a crew with less experience. How do you become a leader that inspires them to want to learn more and increase their capacity to make a contribution, like help upscale their learning experience? If you're a colleague, are you a limited leader as a colleague? Or are you one who was like Keith 1.0 that brings complaints to every situation and only sees what's wrong and what's not possible? Most recently, a leader and I were talking about them having a difficult conversation with senior leadership. And I admire her for wanting to have this conversation because it's something that we're not often skilled at communicating with others effectively in a way that creates a possibility for it to be a win-win for both parties. And this particular leader had some things that they wanted to address that was completely outside of their control, but there were things that were within their control. So things that maybe outside of your control is pay, how the schedule works, things like that. Those things may be out of your control. The software that the organization has decided to use, you may not be able to immediately or at all affect change in those areas. But making your colleagues or your direct reports feel valued, that's within your control. Saying good morning to them on a regular basis, thanking them for the contribution that they make, finding out how you can help support what their career goals, inviting them to support you and your goals, to accomplish the mission, getting to know people, nurturing the human to human connection. That's within your control. And so if you control for the financial piece, which is a big one, scheduling also can be a big one. But there's a whole nother piece of that pie that's also big, and that's connecting with other people in a well-centered way, with kindness, compassion, creating space for people to show up, and really expand their talents in the service of a greater purpose. Those are things that you can encourage. And so we talked about that. Now, a limited leader won't see that. They will think that's a waste of time, that everyone should have their own agency. But what about you having agency to transcend being a limited leader? That's a different story. I've mentioned this before. My friend John DeCuna, when staff talk about him now as John DeCuna 2.0, it's just rave reviews. He has raving fans out there because he's focused on two things: working on himself and working on how to be a more engaged person when it comes to other human beings in the workplace. He's able to see beyond job titles and positions and how they directly affect his work in their roles. And he sees human beings, and it is showing. It is showing. He doesn't have to talk about what he does. Others are doing it. And so I invite all of you to consider going beyond being a limited leader, not just at work, but of course at work, but in your homes, in your relationships, in your families, and in your community. And the best thing, as we draw near to election day in a few months, the best thing that I can do is not be a limited citizen. I can be an inspiring, kind, and thoughtful neighbor that just has an open heart to you, to others, regardless of who you vote for or what your political leanings are. That's going beyond limitations in this country. So I invite you to become an inspiring leader. Let go of being a limited one.